At the bank, my father pressed a pen into my hand, whispering, "Just sign, it's routine." My stepmother's grip on my elbow tightened until my skin burned. They wanted it to look ordinary, just a daughter agreeing with her parents. But I had rehearsed for this moment. Instead of signing, I slipped a folded note to the teller. Her eyes flicked up, catching the bruise on my arm, and something shifted. Seconds later, the manager locked the glass door. My parents thought it meant victory. They didn't know the real trap had only just begun. Seattle mornings have a way of slipping under your skin, especially in late September. The sky was pale, washed with that faint silver light that makes everything look fragile. I sat at the kitchen table, the laminate surface cool beneath my wrist, and stared at the list I'd written. 3 words square in my block letters, bread detergent bank. The first 2 felt harmless, almost laughably ordinary. Bread, detergent, the stuff of chores of grocery bags and checkout lines. But the third sat like a weight in my chest. Bank. I read it again as though repetition could blunt its sharp edge. The clock above the stove ticked and outside rain tapped on the window. I thought about tearing the note up. Instead, I folded it in half and slipped it into my sweater pocket, the paper damp already from my fingers. That was when the knock came. Too early for a neighbor, too firm for the mailman. My stomach pulled tight as I stood. When I opened the door, my father was already stepping in his smile wide and practiced the same smile he used when he wanted me to believe everything was harmless. "Morning, Evie." He said, his voice brisk but coated in warmth. "We thought we'd catch you before your errands. Perfect timing." Behind him, Marissa clutched a leather folder to her chest like it was a gift or a weapon. Her perfume drifted in, first sharp and sweet. I didn't invite them in, but my father crossed the threshold anyway. His energy always filled a room too fast, like someone opening a window in a storm. Marissa's eyes skimmed over the kitchen, the cup of tea cooling on the counter, the stack of unopened mail, the list I'd left behind. I folded my arms, wishing I'd hidden it. "It's a good day to get everything sorted," Marissa said softly, squeezing the folder tighter. I told myself to breathe evenly, to act like it was just another morning. "I'll grab my sweater," I said, stepping toward the hallway. In the bedroom, I opened my nightstand drawer. Beneath folded scarves lay the small envelope I'd prepared. Plain sealed my handwriting across the front, 4 words that meant everything. My pulse picked up as I held it. For a moment, I imagined the feel of my mother's hands. She used to slip notes into my lunch bag in the same quiet way. I tucked the envelope into my purse next to my wallet and ID and closed the drawer. When I returned, my father was already holding my car keys. He jingled them with an ease that stung. "I'll drive," he said, as if it had already been decided. The morning air bit at my cheeks when we stepped outside. Rain beaded on the SUV's windshield, the wipers twitching to life as Richard started the engine. I slid into the backseat, purse clutched to me. Marissa settled in the passenger side, the folder never leaving her lap. The ride started in silence except for the scrape of the wipers and the steady thrum of tires on wet pavement. Then my father filled it as he always did. "Hardware store's running a sale this week," he said, almost cheerfully. "Good deals on ladders. Weather's turning early, feels like fall already." His tone was meant for neighbors, for strangers at the gas station. A voice that dressed up control as friendliness. I kept my eyes on the window. Houses rolled by porches still strung with late summer flowers, sprinklers leaving damp patches on the sidewalks. The glass fogged with my breath, and I traced a fingertip along it just to keep my hands busy. Marissa shifted, opening the folder across her lap. She angled it toward me. "Nothing complicated," she said. Her manicured finger tapped a line on the top page. "Initial here. It just means they can talk to me if they need anything." At the top of the form, the words were bold and black, "Power of attorney." My throat tightened. I didn't point it out. I didn't argue. I let my gaze drift past the paper to the billboard outside a smiling lawyer's face above the words, "Protect your assets. Trust matters." My reflection ghosted across the glass, looking younger and smaller than I felt. I pressed my purse against me, feeling the envelope's edges through the fabric. It was small, fragile, but it was mine. My father's eyes caught mine in the rearview mirror. "Family takes care of each other. he said, almost softly. But the weight in his voice pressed harder than his smile ever could. The wipers beat a steady rhythm carrying us closer to the bank, closer to the place where their plan waited and where mine would have to begin. The riverfront branch in downtown Tacoma looked harmless from the outside glass walls, reflecting the drizzle planters of tired marigolds by the steps. I had passed it 100 times without a thought. That morning, every pane of glass felt like an X-ray. Inside, the air shifted instantly cooler, laced with the faint smell of coffee and disinfectant polish. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a flat glow. The sound of printers churning paper came in bursts, layered with the low murmur of customers talking to tellers, a place designed to soothe, to make money feel safe. But with Richard's hand on my shoulder guiding me forward, the space felt anything but safe. His touch was light, almost fatherly to anyone watching. To me, it was a leash. "Morning," he said brightly to the security guard by the door. Mr. Collins was older, late 60s, maybe his uniform pressed, but his shoulders slouched like someone who'd seen too much. His eyes flicked over me, then over Marissa with her immaculate hair and that folder clutched like scripture. Something in his gaze lingered a fraction longer than courtesy required, and then he nodded. Marissa's perfume was stronger indoors, sweet and cloying. She walked just ahead, heels clicking on the tiled floor. Her voice carried without volume. "It won't take long, Evie. Just a few signatures." I kept my mouth shut, clutching my purse tight against my ribs. My fingers brushed the envelope inside like it was a lifeline. At the teller line, a young woman with a name tag that read Maya Lopez looked up. Her smile was warm automatic until her eyes landed on me. They faltered for the briefest second, tracing the faint bruise along my forearm where Marissa's hand had dug in earlier in the week. A flicker of recognition or concern crossed her face before she schooled it back into professional calm. "Good morning," she said evenly. "How can I help you today?" Richard answered before I could draw breath. "We're here to finalize some account paperwork for my daughter." His tone was smooth, authoritative, without being impolite like he was doing them a favor. Marissa added, "It's routine. Just a consolidation of authority so the bank doesn't have to chase her with calls." Her smile widened, but her grip on the folder whitened her knuckles. Maya's eyes returned to me just for a moment. A question sat there unsaid. I blinked once as if that tiny motion could carry meaning. She hesitated, then said, "Why don't you take a seat in the waiting area? Our manager can walk you through everything." Richard clapped his hands together softly as though delighted. "Perfect." He steered me toward a low table surrounded by 4 chairs. The glass walls around the lobby made everything feel exposed, yet the air between us pressed close heavy. I sat purse in my lap while Richard laid the folder neatly on the table, aligning it with the edge as though this was his desk. "Routine," he repeated under his breath, sliding a pen from his jacket pocket and setting it in front of me. Marissa sat close, too close, her knee brushing mine. She placed her hand lightly on my elbow again. The pressure was subtle, but I felt the echo of bruises already forming. Her nails were painted pale pink, elegant, like nothing dangerous could come from them. My chest tightened. The walls seemed to lean inward, fluorescent light buzzing louder, the hum of the copier down the hall sharpening. I told myself to breathe, to hold steady, to wait for the right opening. Across the room, Maya glanced our way. She was stacking deposit slips into a tray, but her eyes lingered just long enough to let me know she hadn't dismissed what she'd seen. Beside her, Mr. Collins adjusted his belt, shifting position near the entrance. Small things, ordinary things, but to me, they felt like cracks in the glass hints of possibility. Richard leaned back in his chair, exuding ease, but the drumming of his fingers on the armrest betrayed him. "Just sign Evelyn," he murmured softer now. "No reason to make this bigger than it is." The word bigger echoed in my head. Bigger than a signature. Bigger than the trust I'd already created with Daniel. Bigger than the fear that had followed me from the day of Mom's funeral to this very seat. I pressed my palm over my purse, feeling the corner of the envelope inside. It was still there. My plan was still mine. Then, through the hum of the lobby, I heard the click of heels on tile, measured steady. The sound of authority that didn't need to be loud. A woman in a navy blazer approached her badge, clipped straight, her expression calm but attentive. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm but precise. "I'm Angela, Cross Branch Manager. Why don't we bring these papers into my office? It's always easier to review in private." Richard's smile returned instantly, broad and eager. "That's an excellent idea," he said, rising to his feet. Marissa clutched the folder tighter, standing with him. I followed the envelope, pressing against my side like a secret ready to be revealed. And as we walked toward that office, I couldn't help but wonder whose side would the glass walls reflect when the truth came out, mine or theirs. Angela's office was a small rectangle of glass and beige walls wedged off the main lobby like a fishbowl. A framed print of Mount Rainier hung crooked on one wall, the kind of artwork that came pre-selected from a catalog. A potted plant slumped in the corner, its leaves thirsty. Everything about the space said professional, neutral, safe. But the moment I stepped in the air felt thinner, as though safety was a trick of fluorescent light. "Please have a seat," Angela said, gesturing to a set of chairs around a low desk. Her voice was calm, courteous, but her eyes carried something sharper. She'd read families before. Richard slid into the chair across from her, posture relaxed, smile polished. Marissa sat beside me, folding her skirt neatly, as though that mattered, the leather folder anchored to her lap. I lowered myself into the chair closest to the door, purse tight in my hands. Angela reached for the folder, offering her professional smile. "Why don't we start with the documents?" Richard hesitated just long enough to remind me he hated handing control to anyone, but he passed it across. Angela set it neatly on the desk, then reached for a pen. "Evelyn," Richard said, leaning forward. His tone was warm-pitched, just right to sound fatherly. "All you need to do is sign where it says. It keeps the bank from calling you about every little thing. It saves you time." He placed a pen into my hand before I even realized it. The plastic felt slick cold. Marissa leaned closer, her perfume tightening the air. "It's nothing complicated," she said lightly. Her manicured finger pointed to a line on the first page. "Just your initials here. Routine." Her hand landed on my elbow again, the pressure sharp enough to leave another shadow beneath my skin. I forced myself to smile thinly, though my throat was dry. "Before we start," I said, setting the pen down, "I'll need to provide my ID." Angela nodded. "Of course. Standard procedure." This was the moment I had rehearsed in silence, alone in my bedroom late at night. With steady fingers, I unzipped my purse. My wallet came out first. I slid my driver's license onto the desk, its plastic edges clicking softly. Next came a folded deposit slip, casual enough to seem like habit. And last, tucked neatly beneath them, the plain envelope unmarked, except for my handwriting scrawled across the front. 4 words. I pushed the stack toward Angela as though it was routine. "Here are my documents." Angela accepted them without hesitation. Her face didn't shift, didn't reveal a thing. But for a fraction of a second, her gaze met mine, and something unspoken passed. Recognition. Or was I imagining it? Richard tapped his fingers against the table, impatient. "It's really very simple," he said. "No need to drag this out." Angela's smile didn't waver. "I'll make copies for our file. Then we can proceed." She stood, the folder and documents balanced in her hands, and slipped out of the office. The glass door clicked shut behind her. For a moment, silence stretched. Marissa smoothed her skirt again, then leaned toward me, her whisper sharp. "Don't stall, Evie. The sooner you sign, the sooner this is behind us." Her nails dug lightly into my arm, a warning disguised as affection. Richard chuckled softly, as though amused by my hesitation. "Your mother would have trusted me to handle this," he murmured. "She always knew I was protecting you." The mention of my mother burned. A memory rushed back, standing at her funeral. Richard beside me, his hand firm on my shoulder as he spoke to the lawyer about keeping everything simple. I had been too stunned, too grief-numbed to realize he was signing papers I didn't understand. I blinked the memory away and fixed my eyes on the glass wall. Outside, Maya moved between counters, her hands arranging slips, but her glance cut toward me again. "Mr. Collins," the guard shifted his stance near the entrance. "Small things. Maybe meaningless, maybe not." I tapped my purse lightly, feeling the empty space where the envelope had been. It wasn't mine anymore. It was in Angela's hands now, traveling down the hall toward a copier. My chest tightened, my heartbeat loud enough I was sure they could hear it. But I made myself breathe, slow, steady. I counted silently, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just like I had practiced. Richard leaned closer, his voice low. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Marissa's smile was painted bright, her nails biting my skin. One signature and it's done. But my eyes stayed on the hallway where Angela had disappeared, waiting for the sound that would decide everything. And then it came, the faint click of the copier starting up its hum, steady like a distant engine. Richard exhaled as though victory was near. Marissa loosened her grip slightly. They thought the finish line was in sight. I knew it was only the beginning. The copier hummed down the hall, a sound too ordinary for what it carried. Richard leaned back in his chair, tapping the pen against the folder, the rhythm smug and steady. Marissa perched beside me like a hawk on a branch, eyes fixed, nails grazing my arm in warning. Then the office door opened. Angela returned, folder and papers in hand, her expression smooth, her steps deliberate. She set everything neatly on the desk, arranging them as though nothing unusual had happened. Before we continue, she said lightly, I'll need to verify some details with the account holder directly. Bank policy, it won't take more than a few minutes. Richard's laugh was quick, sharp. She's hard of hearing sometimes. I'll help her through it. Angela's smile didn't falter. It's regulation. I'll call you right back in. Her voice carried the kind of firmness you couldn't argue with without sounding unreasonable. For a beat, Richard held her gaze, then rose with a stiff smile. Fine. Marissa's nails pressed into my arm one last time before she stood, folder clutched tight against her chest. Her smile was bright enough to blind, but her eyes cut toward me like glass. We'll wait right outside, Evie. Don't keep us long. The door clicked shut behind them. The hum of a white noise machine in the corner filled the silence. Angela settled across from me, folding her hands on the desk. Her voice softened. Evelyn, I read your note. My pulse jumped. For a moment, the room tilted, but Angela's steady eyes anchored me. She continued, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. You can answer yes, no, or explain more if you need. Just answer honestly. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. First, she said, her tone even, are you being pressured to sign documents you don't want to sign? Yes, I whispered. The word scratched out of me, rough but certain. Angela gave the smallest nod, not of surprise, but of confirmation. Second, do you understand that these forms would give control of your finances, including your house, to your father and stepmother? Yes. The word was clearer this time, steadier. Third, do you feel safe at home with them visiting you? The hum of the white noise machine seemed to grow louder. I looked down at my hands, pale against the wood of the desk. A faint ridge of my thumbnail caught the light. I thought of nights when Richard had let himself in, unannounced, Marissa trailing behind, both smiling, both moving through my kitchen as though it were theirs. I thought of the bruises that bloomed afterward, explanations I never gave to anyone. I shook my head. No. Angela exhaled quietly, as though confirming what she already suspected. She reached for the phone on her desk, her fingers precise on the buttons. Her voice was clipped, efficient. This is the Riverfront branch. We have a senior customer under duress. Possible fraudulent power of attorney. Initiating hold, requesting compliance review, and contacting Tacoma police. She hung up, then leaned forward. Her voice softened again, steady. You did the right thing, Evelyn. Tears pricked behind my eyes, but I held them back. The room felt both too small and suddenly vast, like I could finally breathe. Through the glass wall, I could see Richard pacing in the lobby, Marissa seated with her legs crossed, folder still clutched tight. Richard's mouth moved in impatient words I couldn't hear. Marissa glanced toward the office every few seconds, her smile brittle. Angela followed my gaze. We'll bring them back in, she said, but you won't be alone in this. I touched the side of my purse. The music box inside shifted slightly under my fingers. My mother's box, my anchor. The tiny ridges of its carved lid pressed into my palm. A memory surfaced, Mom winding it on a rainy night, the tinkling notes filling our small living room, her voice low as she said, "When you feel small, Evie, remember you don't have to face everything alone." The door handle rattled faintly, Richard's silhouette filling the glass. Angela straightened, smoothing the documents into a neat stack. Her professional smile returned a mask, but not a lie. "Ready?" she asked softly. I nodded, breath steady now, my mother's words like a thread running through me. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and my father's voice arrived ahead of him, bright and false. "See, that wasn't so hard," but in my chest something had shifted. I wasn't small anymore. Richard strode back into the office like he owned it, his shoes clicking against the tile with every step. Marissa followed, smoothing her skirt as though they had just stepped out for coffee, her smile bright and sharp. The glass door closed behind them, and for a moment the four of us were sealed together. Air, heavy with the scent of Marissa's perfume and the faint hum of the white noise machine. Angela gestured toward the chairs. "Let's resume." Her tone was professional steady. But I caught the way her hand lingered briefly over the documents, protective as if drawing a boundary. Richard sat leaning forward on his elbows. "We don't need to waste more time," he said. "Evelyn knows this is in her best interest. We've already explained everything." Marissa chimed in quickly, her voice sugar-sweet. "It's just efficiency, Evie. One signature and you don't have to deal with all those annoying bank calls. You'll thank us later." Her hand brushed my arm again, a gesture so casual anyone watching might mistake it for affection. But her nails pressed just enough to leave a whisper of pain. Angela opened the folder. She didn't look at them, she looked at me. "Let's go through this step by step." Richard smiled, but his fingers drummed a restless beat on the desk. "Fine." The first page bore the bold heading again. "Power of Attorney." The words seemed to fill the room. My pulse quickened, but I kept my eyes steady. Angela tilted the document, her eyes narrowing slightly. She ran her finger along the bottom edge, stopping at a notary seal pressed into the corner. The ink was blurred, bleeding faintly into the fibers of the paper. "This seal," she said, her tone mild, "is irregular. The number doesn't align with our records." Richard's jaw tightened. "It's valid. We wouldn't be here otherwise." Marissa's laugh was too quick. "Mobile notary. Perfectly standard. These things happen." Angela didn't argue. She simply noted something on a pad of paper, her movements even. "I'll confirm with compliance." Richard leaned back, feigning calm, but his foot tapped against the floor. The sound grated sharp in the quiet. Across the glass, I caught sight of Maya at her station. She was watching us while shuffling deposit slips, her brow faintly furrowed. Mr. Collins shifted again near the lobby entrance, his weight moving from one foot to the other, eyes narrowing toward our office. Marissa's voice cut into my thoughts. "Evie, don't overthink this. It's just paperwork. Think how much easier your life will be when you don't have to keep track of everything yourself." Her tone was coaxing, but underneath it pulsed impatience, almost desperation. I remembered another voice, hers months earlier, when she'd stood in my kitchen and said, "You're not good with details. Let Richard handle it." That day, she'd taken a bill from my counter and folded it into her purse. I'd laughed nervously, too uncertain to object. Now the memory burned. Angela lifted her phone, dialing with precision. Her words were clipped. "Compliance cross here. Reviewing power of attorney documents with irregular seal. Need immediate confirmation." She paused, listening, her eyes flicking briefly to me. Then she added, "Possible fraud indicators. Customer under duress." Richard let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's ridiculous." His voice was louder now, sharp enough to carry. Angela's expression didn't change. She hung up, setting the phone gently on its cradle. The room was quiet except for the hum of the machine and the faint whir of the copier down the hall. Then, from somewhere outside, the sound of sirens cut through the drizzle. Faint at first, then rising, threading through the streets of Tacoma. Richard stiffened. Marissa's hand tightened on the folder. For a moment, no one spoke. Angela's tone was even. "Until compliance confirms, no action will be taken." Richard snapped, "We don't need compliance. We need my daughter's signature." His words cracked through the air harsher than anything he'd said all morning. The smile was gone now. Marissa touched his arm quickly, her voice smoothing over his roughness. Richard, let her finish her process. It doesn't matter, it'll all be fine. But her eyes betrayed her, darting toward the glass where Maya and Collins lingered. I pressed my hand to my purse again, feeling the ridges of the music box inside. I hadn't opened it, but its presence steadied me. In my mind, I heard the faint notes it carried, the melody my mother had wound into my childhood. Sirens grew louder, closer. Then they cut off abruptly, leaving only silence and the buzz of the lights. Angela folded her hands. We'll wait for confirmation. Richard exhaled sharply through his nose. His shoulders squared, his fists tightening on the arms of his chair. The illusion of patience was crumbling. Marissa's smile returned, brittle but clinging. Evie, she whispered, don't embarrass us. Just sign. Her nails grazed my arm again. I turned my head slowly, meeting her eyes. For the first time, I didn't look away. Her smile flickered. Through the glass, the door opened, and two figures entered the lobby, dark uniforms badges catching the fluorescent light. Officers. Their presence filled the space with a different kind of authority, quiet but undeniable. Richard saw them and muttered under his breath, too low for anyone but me to hear. This isn't over. Angela rose, calm as ever. Gentlemen, she said, thank you for coming. The room seemed to shift, the ground tilting. For the first time that morning, I felt the possibility of something breaking open. Not me, not my resolve, but the walls they had tried so hard to press around me. The two officers filled the lobby with their presence, not loud, not aggressive, just steady. Officer Ramirez, tall with close-cropped hair, offered a polite nod as he entered the office. Officer Chin remained by the door, scanning the room with sharp, watchful eyes. The air shifted, a ripple of authority moving through the space. Angela introduced them with ease. This is Officer Ramirez and Officer Chin from Tacoma PD. They're here to ensure everything proceeds correctly. Richard gave a short laugh, dismissive. Police. That's unnecessary. We're handling family matters here. Just signatures. Nothing more. Ramirez's tone was calm, unbothered. Sir, we're here because the bank requested us. Let's keep this straightforward. Marissa leaned forward, her smile-wide voice pitched high with false brightness. Really, officers, this is just Evelyn getting a little nervous. It happens. She's fragile sometimes. Her hand darted for my arm again, fingers brushing my sleeve. Instinctively, I pulled back my chair, scraping against the floor. The sound rang louder than I expected. For a second, no one moved. Then I spoke, my voice low but clear. Don't touch me. The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. For the first time, Richard's smile cracked. Angela cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. She set the documents on the desk, flipping slowly to the first page. Let's review, shall we? Her finger pointed to the blurred notary seal. This seal is fraudulent. Compliance has confirmed the number does not exist. Richard's voice sharpened. That's impossible. Marissa jumped in quick as a shadow. We hired a mobile notary. They must have made an error. Her laugh was thin. Clerical mistakes happen all the time. Angela turned another page, her tone even but firm. Beyond that, this form contradicts our file. 3 weeks ago, Evelyn executed a living trust, placing her assets into protection under co-trusteeship with her brother, Daniel Harper. These documents would directly conflict with that trust. The words landed like a stone. Richard's face drained of color, then flushed red. He turned to me, his voice breaking into disbelief. You did this behind my back. My hands trembled, but my voice came out steady. I did it to protect myself. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the white noise machine. Marissa's knuckles whitened around the folder. Her eyes flicked to Richard, then to the officers calculating. Angela didn't give her time. She picked up a small digital recorder from her desk, set it down, and pressed a button. For accuracy, we record document reviews when concerns arise. This protects all parties. Richard barked a laugh, but it sounded strained. Fine. Let's get this farce over with. Angela looked at me. Evelyn, for the record, do you understand what these documents would do if signed? I swallowed hard, then answered. They would give my father and stepmother control of my money and my house. Officer Ramirez nodded slowly, noting my words. Marissa's veneer cracked her voice, dropping low, meant for me alone. Evie, think carefully. You don't want to shame your family in front of strangers. Just sign. Her perfume stung, cloying in the small office. My throat tightened. I pressed my hand to my purse, needing something solid. The music box inside shifted. I reached in and pulled it free, setting it on the desk. Its carved wood gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light worn from years of my mother's touch. My thumb brushed the winder. A single note chimed high and thin, trembling through the tense air. Every head turned toward it. Richard sneered. What's that supposed to mean? But I didn't answer him. I wound the box once, and the delicate melody began to play, fragile, persistent, impossible to ignore. Something about the sound cut through the performance, the pretense. Marissa's smile faltered. Richard's jaw clenched. The music was my mother's voice in the room, a reminder of the woman they could never manipulate, the strength she'd left in me. I spoke over the tune, my voice firmer now. This box belonged to my mother. She told me once, when you feel small, you don't have to face everything alone. Angela met my gaze and nodded almost imperceptibly. Officer Chin stepped closer to Richard. Sir, we need you to remain calm. But Richard exploded to his feet, face-red finger stabbing the air. This is a setup. She's turning you against me with toys and lies. Ramirez rose too, blocking his advance. Sir, sit down. His voice was calm, but iron beneath it. Marissa clutched Richard's sleeve, whispering fiercely, Stop! You're making it worse! Richard shook her off, sputtering. This is family business, not yours, not hers, not anyone's. The music box played on, delicate and steady, underscoring every word. Angela remained composed, her voice cutting cleanly through the chaos. Compliance has confirmed the forgery. Officers, please proceed. Ramirez nodded. Richard Harper. Marissa. Harper, we'll need you to step outside with us. Richard sputtered his voice, breaking between rage and disbelief. You'll regret this, Evelyn. You'll regret. Chin moved behind him, her hand near his shoulder, guiding him toward the door. Marissa followed her mask, slipping eyes sharp with fury. The glass door shut, sealing the noise of their protests outside. In the sudden quiet, the music box played its final notes, soft as a breath, fading into silence. My hands shook as I closed the lid, but my chest felt lighter, steadier, as though the sound had carried me across a line I'd been afraid to step over. Angela reached across the desk, her hand briefly covering mine. You're not alone anymore. I nodded, unable to speak, my mother's melody still echoing inside me. The officer's footsteps faded down the lobby, then out into the drizzle beyond the glass doors. Richard's voice carried one last time, muffled through the walls, half a shout, half a plea, but then the sound dissolved into the hum of traffic outside. Angela gathered the fraudulent papers into a neat stack, slipping them into a separate folder marked for investigation. She looked up at me, her expression calm, but not cold. We'll preserve everything for compliance and the police. You don't have to handle this on your own anymore. I managed a quiet, thank you. The words felt too small for the weight they carried. When I stepped outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. The air was sharp, rinsed clean. And there, leaning against his truck near the curb, was Daniel. My brother. His jaw was set, eyes tight with worry. Angela must have called him. Evie, he said, striding forward, his hand firm on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded, though the tremor in my chest said otherwise. He didn't press. Instead, he opened the passenger door of his truck. Come on, let's get you home. The drive was quiet. Tacoma streets blurred past neon signs glowing in the damp air, traffic lights blinking against puddled asphalt. Daniel kept both hands steady on the wheel. I watched his reflection in the window jaw, tight eyes, scanning the same way he had looked when we were kids, hiding under the dining table while Dad's temper stormed above us. Back then, he'd whispered, Stay quiet, Evie. I've got you. And he still did. When we reached the house, he moved quickly, purposefully. He swapped out the lock screws clinking against the hardwood floor, the electric drill biting into the doorframe. The sound was loud, but strangely comforting, like armor being forged. He mounted a small security camera above the porch, adjusted it, then double-checked every window latch. I sat at the kitchen table listening to the steady rhythm of his work, letting it stitch a sense of safety back into the walls. The kettle whistled faintly, and I made tea, 2 mugs, one for him, one for me. When he finally sat down across from me, his shirt damp with rain and sweat, he took the mug without a word. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was protective. On the table lay the folded grocery list from that morning bread detergent bank. I smoothed it out with my palm, the ink blurred where my fingers had pressed too hard. Beside it, I set the music box. I opened the lid, winding it gently, and let the melody unfurl into the room. The sound filled the space fragile but resolute. Daniel leaned back, his eyes softening. Mom would have been proud. My throat tightened, but I nodded. After a while, I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. My pen hovered, then moved slowly, words forming one after another. Dad, I love you. I want you to find help. But you cannot touch my money, my house, or my life. If you try again, I will call the police again. I signed my name and folded the letter, tucking it into the drawer beside the morning's list. The gesture felt final, but not cruel. Daniel glanced at me. You sure you want to keep it here? Yes, I said. It belongs in this house. Not hidden, not erased. The rain had stopped completely now. A sliver of evening sun broke through the clouds, spilling across the kitchen, catching on the steam rising from our mugs. The light touched the music box, making the wood glow as if it still carried my mother's hands. I rested mine beside it, steady at last. The house was quiet, but this time the quiet wasn't hollow. It was safe. And though a shadow of Richard's parting words lingered, "You'll regret this," I knew better. Regret wasn't mine to carry anymore.